Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk with interesting people in a variety of professions, and along the way, get ideas to enhance success in all categories of your life. Successful Living with Bill Napick starts right now. And here's your host, Bill Napick.
That's right. Successful Living with Bill Napick. That's me. And today, Successful Living with Don Bentley. He is the author of a book called Without Sanction. He is also a former Apache helicopter pilot. That's right, with the United States Army. He was awarded the Bronze Star Medal. In addition, he worked with the FBI. Don, first of all, thank you for your service and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. I'm happy to be here.
And as I started your book just yesterday, so I'm not a fast reader, but I'm enjoying so far the book and your character, Matt Drake. So first of all, let's tell people about the book Without Sanction and give them an idea of your inspiration of the book and how exciting, a little bit how it is to, I know a lot of people think about, I want to write a book, and here's your first book, and the publisher has it out, and it looks great, and so far is reading very well.
Well, thank you, Bill. I'll take it as a sign of victory that you have made it to page 50 and haven't dropped out yet, so I appreciate that. So a couple things, I guess. It is my third novel, my first novel that was published, but I actually wrote 3 books before that didn't sell. And the reason why I say that is it's oftentimes we look at, especially if you want to be a writer and you follow writers on Twitter or social media and you see, the post that an author who's writing in the genre that you want to write in suddenly has a 2-book deal and it looks like it comes from nowhere and you're thinking, man, that's never going to be me. I'm never going to get there. And I guess I'd start with offering a little bit of encouragement to any of the folks out there who want to be writers, and that it took me, like I said, 17 years and 3 books that didn't sell before I got good enough at my craft to sell. And so I'm glad that you enjoy the book, but it was certainly a long time in coming. And from a kind of where did the book come from perspective or the origin story, I guess, of the book is kind of from a couple different places. A friend of mine, Nick Petrie, a fellow author, he writes an amazing series of books featuring a character called Peter Ash, and the first book on that is the Drifter series. He told me that when you look at a novel, what the novelist is actually trying to do in the pages of that book is kind of answer a question for themselves, and they answer that question as they're writing the book. And so for me, Without Sanction, that question came from my time as an Apache pilot in Afghanistan. There was a particular operation that went horribly wrong, and like a lot of folks who are veterans or folks who are police officers or first responders and have been in situations that have gone wrong, you spend a lot of time afterwards asking yourself, what could I have done differently? And reliving that and reliving the decisions you make. And I think that's the first part of it. I think the second part of it that you start to work through is how do I continue from here, and how do I, in some ways, atone for what happened, or how do I make up for what happened, or use my life to try and rectify what happened. And so I wanted to address that question with my character. And so my character, Matt Drake, is a case officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so his job is to run and recruit assets, basically to turn folks into spies and to use them to get the information that he needs to get. And before the book begins, one of his assets, one of the people that he was running, is killed, and the man's family is killed, and Matt believes that happened because of something that he did wrong. And so as the book progresses, he gets the chance to kind of to atone for or address that failure, but what it means is going back to Syria, kind of going back to the scene of where everything went wrong and having the courage to try again, if you will. And so that was definitely part of it, of where the book came from. I think the other part, so the folks within the special operations community figure very heavily in my book. And Matt Drake, as a DIA case officer, is actually a fellow Army Ranger as well. And I wanted I had the fortune, once I got out of the FBI, for about the last 8 years or so, to work in a community and with folks who were primarily from the special operations community. And I wanted to give readers kind of a window into that world, and not just into that world, but to the people that populate that world. And so as a Ranger, there's a saying or a creed that governs the way that you live your life, both in the Army and once you get out of the Army. And I want to clarify that I'm not a Ranger and have never been to Ranger school, but I had the great fortune to work with a number of folks who did. And part of the Ranger creed that figures very heavily in my book is a stanza that talks about how surrender is not a Ranger word, and I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And that stanza is very important both to the book Without Sanction and to kind of things that, like I said, when that operation went horribly wrong in Afghanistan, to an aspect of my life where I saw the war in Afghanistan stop while everybody in theater tried to find these missing SEALs that were a part of this operation that had gone wrong, and it just moved me in a way that I still have a hard time explaining. This aspect that your country, if you go into harm's way on your country's behalf, your country basically makes a bargain with you that says, hey, I can't guarantee that you will come back from this necessarily alive, but I will guarantee that you will come back. And we see that even now with the efforts we make in Korea to recover veterans from the Korean War, almost 50 odd years ago, that your country makes that contract with you. And that if you're a Ranger, that's part of your ethos. It's part of the creed that you recite that governs your life. And so that's kind of another aspect of where the book came from, is I wanted to incorporate that and give folks a window into that. And then the final part came from, I think, my time as an FBI agent. My first job as an agent was to run and recruit what we call sources, or what folks in the intelligence community call assets. And that's a very, very interesting job, I guess, to say the least, because what you're doing is basically you're persuading someone to provide you with information, and you may be asking them to do some things that could put them in harm's way in order to provide that information for you. And I thought that would make that kind of inherent conflict would make a great pretext for a book. And so that's part of the reason why my main character, Matt Drake, is a case officer, and that is his job, is to run and recruit assets for the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Well, you have had real life experience into worlds most people never will go, and their only glimpse is the news, books, movies, those things. But when you talk about the community, first of all, being in the Army and for aviation in itself is fascinating, and I think a lot of us think, gee, would I rather fly a plane or a helicopter? Helicopters seem like a lot of fun. A friend of mine used to have a helicopter company, so I got two in Philadelphia, so I had my fair share of helicopter rides. I loved it. You can hover. Up there in Pennsylvania, you can look at the history where Washington crossed the Delaware and all those things. But you were in combat in a helicopter. That's a whole nother deal. And then the world of the FBI agent, I think, fascinates people from day one. Tell people, as you were a young Don Bentley, somewhere along the line, you were like a lot of young men that said, hey, I want a little action in my life. Maybe, right?
Yeah.
So you sought out things that had some action and, sure, plenty of danger. And tell us a little bit about how you even got on the path, and then at what age were you where you started thinking, hey, it would be nice to be a pilot, be in the Army, be in the FBI. How did that strike you, or when did it strike you?
Yeah, so my family, I grew up in a very patriotic family. My dad served in the Army during Vietnam. He was not in Vietnam, but he served in the Army during Vietnam. And my grandfather, the same thing, served during World War II. And so from a very young age, I grew up knowing that I wanted to serve my country, or at least spend some time serving my country. And when I started to look as I ended up going to college on an Army ROTC scholarship. And so as I got closer to graduating high school and trying to figure out which branch of the service that I wanted to join, the way I looked at it is I wanted to do things for a period of time that I wouldn't be able to do anywhere else. And there are a lot of great reasons that folks join the service. Some folks join in order to get a skill that they can use on the outside, which is a great thing to do. The Army, all the services have some amazing programs of skills that you can take with you once you leave. But I kind of wanted to do the opposite and to do something that I knew that I would never be able to get a chance to do again. And so my dad, growing up, had his civilian commercial pilot's license and also his instructor license. And so he, from a very young age, he used to take me flying around in Cessnas, and we would do that. And as he was, trying to teach me the inner and out, the finer points of piloting an aircraft, what I kept thinking is it would be really neat to shoot a pair of rockets into that hillside right there, which was not exactly what most of his students probably drove them to do. And so when I was looking, I knew that I wanted to fly, but I also knew that was a very hard thing to achieve. And so when I looked at the different services, and primarily I looked at the Air Force and the Army, I thought that it would be pretty incredible to fly planes in the Air Force, but there weren't too many other things, if you couldn't fly planes, that I thought would be all that much fun to do. Where when I looked at the Army, I thought, man, if I don't make aviation, if I don't make the cut for that, they have a ton of other fun jobs, whether it's, driving a tank around or parachuting out of planes or something like that I was quite certain at the age of 18 would be very fun to do if I couldn't fly helicopters. And so I was very, very fortunate to get branched aviation, which means that after I graduated from college and was commissioned as an Army second lieutenant, I went to flight school. And you don't know when you're commissioned in branched aviation what helicopter you're going to fly. In fact, there's an order of merit list, and you spend your entire time when you're first getting your wings trying to figure out which helicopter you want to fly and competing on tests and things like that for your class rank, so that hopefully you'll have the ability to choose which helicopter you want to fly. But it was kind of funny. The very first day of flight school, they actually invite your spouse to come in with you, and it's kind of an orientation to the Army, and your spouses can understand a little bit about what the next year and a half to 2 years is going to be like while you're in flight school. And they, towards the end of the presentation, the instructor looks at all the spouses and says, okay, I'm going to give you a test, and you're going to take that test on behalf of your Army spouse. And by the results of that test, we're going to be able to see what kind of helicopter your spouse is going to fly. And so they kind of go through this questionnaire that says, if your spouse is very detail oriented, if they're on time all the time, if they're, whatever, then they're going to be a Black Hawk pilot. And they kind of go down to the list until they get to the point where they say, if your spouse really loves setting things on fire and lighting off fireworks and destroying things, they're going to be an Apache pilot. And my wife looked at me and she's like, that is going to be you. And I said, if I'm very lucky, you're right. And we both were. So, yeah.
The Apache helicopter. We're talking with Don Bentley. He is the author of the book called Without Sanction. I recommend it highly. Again, the book is Without Sanction. Don, give us another word as far as the Apache helicopter goes. What's the capabilities? I mean, it has fire. What does it have? Missiles on it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful machine. Most of the time, if you're lucky enough to fly Apaches, most days you can't believe that they're actually paying you to fly this helicopter. So it's a twin engine helicopter. It is now the latest model is called the Guardian. When I went into Afghanistan, we had just transitioned from the Alpha model Apaches to the Longbow Apaches. And so it's a twin-engine helicopter where the pilot and co-pilot sit one behind each other, and it has a 30-millimeter cannon, which hangs under the nose, and that cannon is slave to your eye. And so it's, or one of the ways that you can use it is slave to your eye. And so literally, when you have it slave to your eye, wherever you look, the cannon moves. And so to engage a target, you just have to look at it and squeeze the trigger. And when you squeeze the trigger, it sounds like there's a jackhammer underneath of you, and the whole helicopter shakes, and you can feel this thumping in your chest as it goes. It's maybe the best feeling in the world. I don't know. So it's got a 30 millimeter cannon, and then it has rocket pods that you can have on it as well, and then both laser guided and radar guided Hellfire missiles as well. And so it really is, it's an amazing aircraft that was originally designed during the Cold War era. If you remember, there's a section of Germany called the Fulda Gap, which the Soviet horde of tanks was supposed to pour through if World War III kicked off. And so the Apache helicopter was originally designed to help combat the overwhelming amount of Russian armor, Russian tanks. And so it was built to stand off at 6 or 7 kilometers outside the range of the tank's main gun, and to be able to take out armor with Hellfire missiles. And so it was originally developed to be a platform that you could sit at a hover and engage armored platforms. And then as the War on Terror kicked off after September 11th, and the first Apache units deployed into Afghanistan, what we found is that it was also a very good platform for engaging targets on the ground. The difference being that a lot of times you didn't, because Afghanistan is so high, and during the summer months it's so hot, you didn't have the power necessarily to hover. And so we very much went back to a lot of Vietnam-era tactics, which was doing diving fire and diving rocket fire. And it's funny, when I went through flight school, 20-something years ago, I guess maybe closer to 25 years ago now, most of our instructor pilots were old Vietnam vets, and they used to tell us stories about all kinds of things, and one of them being how in Vietnam, when it was very, very hot, they were underpowered, and they used to have to choose between gas or bullets. So you only had enough power for one. So did you want more gas or more bullets? And being young, hotshot pilots that we were, we disregarded most of what they told us until, 13 years later, I guess not that long, about 6 or 7 years later, I'm sitting in Afghanistan in the middle of the summer without enough power to hover and trying to decide, do I want more gas or bullets? So it's kind of funny how things come back around that way. But it was an amazing aircraft to fly.
And as we hear Don talk about your experience with helicopters, the Apache helicopter, of course, my mind went back to Apocalypse Now, too. For some reason, you mentioned Vietnam. I'm picturing Robert Duvall, the speakers, the whole thing. But these are your experience is unique, that you bring this into the characters in the book, the setting of the book. So if people are enjoying hearing you talk about your service in the Army, they're going to enjoy the book Without Sanction. And, Don, we have about 4 minutes left or so whatever you want to tell people, certainly we'll recommend the book Without Sanction. They can pick it up.
Sure. So, yep, it comes out on the 3rd of March. Everywhere that books are sold, you can actually pre-order it now, as you said, through Amazon. And I'm actually coming to your neck of the woods there on the 6th of March. I'm going to do a book signing at Murder by the Book there in
March
Houston,
6th.
and would love to see all of your audience members to come out. We'd love to see them there. I think the biggest part for me, and what I'd love for people to get out of this, is that it's the amount of folks who serve right now in the military is less than 0.5% of the total U.S. population. And my time in the military was fantastic. The folks who saw me in uniform, the American people in general, have been nothing but supportive, I think, of folks in the uniform. But that very small percentage means that most people probably don't know a veteran, or may not even have a family member who's a veteran. So I wanted to kind of use the book to help bridge that gap, to give people a vantage point into kind of the men and women who they may not know, but who are very much still today in harm's way on their behalf. And so that's part of what I wanted to do too. And hopefully once you get to page 51, you'll figure out it's still a pretty entertaining story as well. So
So March 6th is a Friday, Murdered by the Book. And what time? Probably 6 o'clock, I think they have their events. Is that
6:30, yep, 6:30 at Murdered by the Book.
So people can reach you. Do you get to Houston often, Don?
Not. This will be my first trip in a long time, so I don't.
And as you, with your military aircraft experience, do you still fly?
No, I haven't for a long time. I think there are two different kinds of pilots. There are folks who love to fly for flying's sake, and there are folks who love the mission that they got to do in that aircraft. And so I haven't seen anybody yet who'd let me strap a pair of rocket pods on a Cessna. So
yeah,
I fall into that latter category for sure.
It would take the motto, don't mess with Texas, to another level if you did, because I don't know if people know this, it's on your book, but you are a resident of the great state of Texas, as I am.
A proud resident. Yes, I am. My wife, when we first came here in 2001, we were stationed at Fort Hood, and my wife was one of those who got the bumper sticker that says, I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could. And that sums us up. Texas.
And where were you born, by the way?
I was born in Connecticut and then lived most of my life in Ohio before going into the Army. But like I said, we've been in Texas, in and out of Texas since 2001 and here north of Austin since 2012. So we love Texas. My older two were both born at Fort Hood and are Texas natives. And, it's Texas, when people ask me about what makes Texas special, in my opinion, Texas is one state that it's distilled down everything that makes America America. And, the sense of pride, the sense of rugged individualism, that everything that you think of when you think of America, that's all distilled in Texas.
That is so well put. You can meet Don Bentley, see his book. He'll probably even sign it for you March 6th,
Absolutely.
which is a Friday, Murder by the Book. I'll be there, and I'm going to bring the book I have now, Don, and meet you there right here in Houston, Texas. Murder by the Book, March 6th, Don Bentley. If people want to learn more, they can Google Don Bentley, find out more. Don, thank you so much for being on the show. Once again, thank you for your service to our country. As a military officer and an FBI agent, agents do tremendous work all the time. Thank you so much, Don Bentley. You've been listening.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
You bet. You've been listening to Successful Living with Bill Napick, and today, Don Bentley. Check out more past shows at radiobill.net.